welcome to another episode of the Jets Afterburners podcast. New York Jets stand 16. Right there is my good friend Liam. Look at that guy. He's ready for tonight. What's going on?
Yes, sir. I got my my United States Marines shirt on. Got my camo hat. Ready, man. You know, this is something near and dear to all of our hearts. Usually this show is all about, we keep it light, joking around a lot, but there's a lot of serious issues going out there, especially with our military. It's nice to honor our military, not just on Veterans Day or a holiday that everyone does. These people every single day are going through this. They're on the front lines. They're veterans. They fought. It's nice that we could do this on just a random day for us.
Without a doubt, man. And just piggybacking on what you said, we're always talking about the Jets and we love our team, even though they have not given us a lot of things to be proud of. But we got to step outside of that world just for tonight. Because again, we're taking a moment here to acknowledge and express our sincere gratitude to the veterans among us whose service and sacrifices have been instrumental in upholding our nation's values and freedoms. The strength, the resilience, and unwavering commitment of veterans who have served in various capacities. Now, we at the Jets Afterburners podcast, thank you, especially the veterans that are going to be coming on to the show. Everything that you guys have done just goes beyond words. You guys do everything possible to protect us in order for us to lead a normal life. And this is just a little token for us just to showcase our gratitude towards you. Now, with that, I'm going to start bringing on heroes. These are the heroes, guys. And so many of you that have served that are watching right now, you could always call in, comment. This is for you, 100%. Yep. Now, we bring on Maddie.
Hey.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Absolutely. And you served in the Navy, that's correct?
I was.
Very good. And now we have Nate, who is currently serving there, active duty, the Air Force.
Hey guys, yep, still in, still loving what I do, so I'll keep doing it for a while.
Love it. And my source, my man of over 35 years of friendship, my good man, Ryan, who also served in the Air Force. Welcome along, my man. Where's Ryan at? Ryan, you hear me?
Thank Dan and Liam. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Now we can.
Yeah, now we can.
So I want to get right into it. Number one, I want to say thank you to all of you. But let's start with Maddie. Maddie, what got you into this? What gave you that inkling, that spark to say, you know what, I'm gonna serve my country?
Well, I grew up, my mom was a single mom before she got remarried when I was 13. So we didn't have money for college and I wanted to go to CIA. And I was walking by a recruiter's table and he's like, we send our cooks to CIA for free and they get training there. So I was like, all right, well, I could do that. Growing up, my grandfather was Air Force for 34 years, I think. So it was always instilled in us. So I was like, I could do this. And that's kind of what brought me into the service.
Wow. Awesome. Now,
Very
Nate,
brave for doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Nate, what got you into it?
Man, to tell you the truth, I'm from a, mid to small town in Minnesota. I was just making some knucklehead choices with my life, meaning I wasn't doing anything and spending a lot of time at the bar. I had a good stepmom who was looking out for me at the time, point me in the right direction with my dad, and I joined, and honestly, I tell them it's the best decision of my life.
Wow. Now we have another veteran as well here. Let's see if we got the sound check going on. Eddie, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you
All
hear me?
right. Yeah. Excellent. Eddie.
Yes.
So Eddie is from the Marines.
I am. I don't look like it now, but at one point I was in the Marine Corps.
Very cool. Thank you for your service. And what got you into this?
Well, I come from an immigrant family. This country's always been great. Has always been good to us. And I always, growing up, my mom always, there's always patriotism, you know. And then I was wanting to find a way to give thanks. So obviously back in September 11, 2001, you know, we were attacked. And for me, like it didn't really click then. It was during the second anniversary when they're reading the names. I cut school that day. I'm like, I'm gonna stay home today. So I started turned on to Channel 11 here in New York City back then when it was still through the airwaves, you know. So I turned it on, and then I'm just listening to the names, and it's like, man, you know what? That's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go sign up for the Marines, and I did that.
Wow.
And then so on September 14th is when I went down. What I thought it was September 14th, but my brother is also a Marine. Actually, it's three of us. Three of us. And then but he says when he was a recruiter, he looked into my chart, my file, my chart. I work in healthcare, so I said chart.
Yeah.
But he said he looked into my file and he's like, bro, he's like, they've got you enlisting here in the Marines at September 11. And I'm like, wow, that's nuts. I thought it was September 14. And that day after school, I had to walk down in front of my building to go to the recruiting station. So I didn't want my mom to see me. So I took the long way around. And I went to the recruiter, you know, took all the tests. At the time, I wasn't a citizen, so I couldn't. There was a lot of jobs that were unavailable to me as a resident. So I became what they call a motor transport operator or truck driver for the Marine Corps. Went to boot camp on my birthday. Graduated on Halloween, and then I picked up with a unit called 2nd Combat Engineer Battalion, 2nd CEB, out in Camp Lejeune, and I deployed twice with them. And that's where I did all my service. And I got out. I ended up getting out. My wife was like, I had my first child during my second deployment. And my wife was like, I can't do this no more. She's like, you can say if you want, but you're going to be by yourself. She's like, we can get out, start a family. And that's what we've done.
Wow, man.
I think you made the right choice.
Yeah. A lot of guys were like, yo, you should have called the bluff.
No. When it comes to family.
No.
Right. I'm like, no, I care about my family.
Yeah.
Of course.
I care about my
It's an
family.
amazing story, man.
Yeah. And especially since at that time was when everything was going on. Everything was still going hot, you know, at the beginning of the war, the middle. That would have been my whole career. So God knows what might have happened to me.
Wow.
Right. Well,
Now,
thank God you made it out safe.
Amen to that.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Ryan, what got you into it? What got you into the Air Force?
Well, first, let me go back and correct you. It's not 35 years, it's 25 years. Actually, I think this is exactly 25 years since we've been friends.
Well, no, not really.
So maybe
I knew
we should go out for dinner,
you were
a
a
little
baby.
candlelight dinner, 20-year anniversary. So I come from a really large military family. My dad, he served in the Air Force from 56 to 60. His brother, my uncle, he served in the Korean War in the early 50s with the 1st Cavalry. He was a paratrooper. I got another uncle from my mom's side. He was a Marine. I found out not too long ago I had like a great uncle or something like that. He actually died in Manila during the Philippine-American insurrection 125 years ago. I can go on and on, but in fact, if my dad was still around, he would have probably been angry that I joined the Air Force. Mainly because, and I remember when I was a kid, when Desert Storm was going on, we were watching. I remember when it kicked off, and my dad was like, "Oh, son, if you're gonna join the military, join the Coast Guard." So, Dan, I think you might have met my dad. He had that he smoked like a carton of cigarettes a day voice. So anyway, 9/11 happened. I was 19 years old, and it was a few things. Patriotism was sort of like in the air. My sister, actually, well, she met my sister. She actually worked down there in Ground Zero. So she was like sort of one of those people kind of walking through all that dust. trying to reach the Brooklyn Bridge and get over into Brooklyn, just covered in soot and dust from the buildings that came down. But also, it's also sort of what Nate, you know, wasn't doing anything special with my life and hanging out, doing the regular 18, 19-year-old shenanigans. But years in, went in 2002, so 8 months after 9/11, and went from Germany for a few years to AFSOC headquarters, Air Force Special Ops Command, to Langley. Not Air Force Base in Hampton, Virginia, worked for ACC headquarters, got out, and yeah, that's it. I mean, it's getting back and you know, one of the reasons why I think we want to serve is we want to do something greater than ourselves and continue doing it after I got out. Like everyone here, and I know there's probably going to be a few more people popping up. So I don't know if Dan, if you want me to sort of kind of go ahead or
Yeah, absolutely.
it's up to you.
Go right ahead.
Yeah, go for it.
So these people, I don't really like to talk much about myself, but these people here, and like I said, there should be a few more popping up. Their respective leaders, actually Eddie and Nathan, and Nate, they're actually members of my post in Queens. Eddie's my quartermaster. Basically, he's like my director of finance, and Nate is my new junior vice commander. Eddie will never say it. Eddie's okay. I'm not going to curse. Eddie's a badass. Eddie served in the Battle of Fallujah. So if anybody watching this or anything, definitely look it up. It was an intense battle, and Eddie's also been my rock too as a friend. But this guy's a badass. Nathan, I mean, hell, he's a lifer. So he can explain it himself, but he's big time down in Alabama, senior NCO Academy instructor, and he you know, he's gotten more involved more with the veteran side of stuff, even though he's still in the military. I mean, no matter what, you're still a veteran. Maddie's awesome. Maddie, and I think this is important because for one, Maddie is part of, I believe, what is it? The number's like 16 or 17% of the total force that are women. So there are certain demographics within the military where they're sort of overlooked. Say like women veterans, Eddie, veterans of color. You know, these people, they really, if you look back into history, doesn't matter, it's the post 9/11 wars, global war on terror. You know, women have been a very big force in the background, as well as veterans of color. And this is something that's it's important. And I know there's going to be a few more people popping up, like Livy. She's big out in California with the Department of California VFW. So we're all VFW here. So we're the largest combat veterans organization around the world. And then I believe we have one more. I can't remember who it is at the moment. But back to Maddie. Maddie is I like to call her the tip of the spear. So Maddie's a veteran service officer for the Department of New York VFW. Right now she's leading the Houston Street location. So we haven't had veteran service officers down in Houston Street at the VA regional headquarters in Manhattan. And you know, whether it's helping claims, benefits, I mean, these things are important, especially the first 6 to 12 months that somebody gets out of the military. They tend to be very vulnerable, and they're very, I'm not going to say misguided, but once you leave the military, you get your DD 214, you're officially done. You're sort of out in the wild again. So it's a little bit difficult for people who are military to kind of get back into the civilian world. You know, a lot of veterans now, they're going to school, and it's hard for them to navigate their post 9/11 GI Bill benefits or other benefits. Mental health, that's a very big thing. I know, Dan, that's very close to us with our friend. You know, and then we have, and then I know Eddie can speak, Ethan, Maddie. But yeah, to finish up with Maddie, like I said, she's one of several other service officers throughout the state of New York. And then we also have service officers for the VFW all throughout the country that help veterans with their transition. And these things are important because getting a claim done, benefits, it's directly related to mental health. I'm not going to say anything more because Maddie can speak more on that. Like she's freaking awesome. Like last week, like yesterday, we spent all day in the Capitol in Albany. Last week, she had to hear me talk all day long for like half a week in DC when we're on the Hill, which last week, the first week of March is a big week in DC for veterans, not just the VFW, but other organizations, but we are the list where we go on the Hill and we speak to various U.S. representatives, U.S. senators, and Maddie's actually unofficially part of the legislative team. So that's sort of my wheelhouse. Maddie knows benefits and claims. Like she's really good, but she also knows policy when it comes to this stuff. And she was in these meetings with us. Hell, she was leading them.
Ryan.
But Maddie's great.
I'm going to
interject
that. No, it's okay. I wanted to pick Maddie's brain there,
Okay.
with your service, just being there. And when you came out of it, what led you to do these things like with Ryan and all these veterans going to Washington, D.C. and having that ambition to have your voice heard and to get things done?
So we had talked about it before the show started, but I was almost one of those 22 a day. There was a point in my life where it was rough. And then I got out and everything was stripped and I sank lower. And then I eventually got back on my feet, but there was one point where I had lost my job and I couldn't feed my daughter. I couldn't keep the lights on in the house. And I went to my therapist and she got me involved with this organization. She called them and said, this veteran needs help. And within an hour, they had 2 vans of food at my door. They paid my electric bill. They made sure I was taken care of and back on my feet. And then when I was back on my feet, I continued to try and pay it back, and they would not take anything from me. So from that part forward, it was like, I have to find a new way to pay it forward. And I was going to school. I was going to be a teacher, and I got hired for this job over cocktails and cigars by a fire pit. And it just turned into one of those things where I'm able to help people every day. I'm able to help them get back on their feet, know that someone's there for them, know that they're not getting scammed by claim sharks or, getting ripped off. And I've had veterans come into my office just to see my service dog and cry for a minute. It doesn't matter, male, female, I've had it all. But they're comfortable in my office and they can let that release go.
Wow. That just your nobility, it speaks volumes. That heart, that genuineness, it just showcases your character. And we thank you for that. And we could see that, we could see it through this interview that you wear your heart on your sleeve. And that means the world to us. So we absolutely thank you for that, Maddie.
Thank
Nate.
you. I mean,
oh yeah, I'm sorry.
Sorry. I was going to say,
No.
I mean, someone once brought it up to me that we're veterans. We joined the military to serve the country. And that means protecting the people in it. That doesn't end when we get out of the service.
Right. Now, Maddie, what is that feeling like, just being able to give back and helping fellow veterans and just fellow people in general?
It gives you a sense of purpose.
Right.
There's not, I wake up at 4:30 in the morning to take a 2-hour train ride to the city, and I'm home by 6:30 at night after a 2-hour ride back. But I wouldn't give it up for anything. I love my job. I love being able to help. I love being that person that someone can go to,
Wow.
Yeah, we commend you for that.
Thank you.
Without a doubt. Now, Nate, if you could just dive in a little bit, because you're still active right now.
Still am.
just being on that kind of standby, right? Like, God forbid something happens. What is that feeling like when you know that you have to go out and now you have to defend? Are the first time that you had to do that, what emotions were you going through? And I want to go through the panel as well, because I think as a civilian, you have this mental kind of thought of, oh yeah, if I was in that position, I would do that. There's no parallel there from an actual soldier to a civilian, where your mind is going to like a fantasy land to actually being there. How do you prep yourself? And how was the first time? How was it that you psyched yourself up and you got so laser focused?
Dan, that's an awesome question. And I'm just thinking of the different layers of where I could go here. Like Maddie and Eddie and Ryan, we all joined when war was already happening. So we kind of already had that thought in our mind already. At some point when you step through that door, you knew that you could get called. And now we're kind of in a position, at least from my view, we don't have an active war at that moment. So we are having those conversations. At least at my level as an instructor, we have those conversations in our classroom, because the young men and women that are coming in now, they don't see the same thing that we saw. you know so what is that like? How do you turn it back on? How do you prep those that haven't seen it before to be ready? But to answer that question of what it's like, gosh, 12 years ago now, I was stationed in Germany, and I was supporting a F-16 squadron as a supply member. So I was a parts orderer. Anything in and out that the jet needed, that was my job, to find it in the Air Force repository and get it as fast as possible. But we stood alert and left a few times for a few different things that went on, in the European theater. And it is weird because you find out sometimes 72, sometimes 12 hours prior, and you go home and you get your ready bag and you go back to work and you prep some airplanes, and then you get on another one and go to whatever country that you're going to stage in. In those initial thoughts, you don't really think much. You just you make sure that your wife and your kids are okay, and then you rely on the people next to you.
Wow. It's just to get to that mental aspect of focus. You guys take it to a different level. So wow. Now, Eddie, I was just curious. Was there a time where you had to lead a certain project, or you were led to, where you just had to piece all these puzzles pieces together? If you could just walk us through certain moments.
So, it's kind of a boring story, but I was responsible for creating and implementing the program in my unit for recycling. They used to call it DERMO, Defense Reutilization Management Office. So shell casings, spare vehicle parts, anything that the unit needed to get rid of, they tasked me to do it. So, I created this program, went and took the classes and for my unit. And then by the time I was leaving, I had to train other Marines to do it. So that for me was like my biggest accomplishment, aside from so for my first deployment, I actually got an award. They gave me the award for the most improved Marine of the deployment, so I'm pretty proud of that one. But I feel like I'm prouder of having built that program from the ground up, because before then it was just like all right, you guys take this over to to the landfill or whatever, take it over to get it recycled, and they taxed me with it. I kind of I took that as that's my mission. And so when I did that, I'm not sure if that's kind of what you were asking.
Yeah. Just around there. Again, I'm just trying to put myself in that position where just being led and taking that task by force, and just making sure that the team around me is following, and Maddie, I just wanted to ask a couple of questions as well. The environment that you have now, right, with going to DC and whatnot,
Right.
what is that like as well? I'm just curious, because every time I hear stories from Ryan, I'm like, wow, that's so amazing that Ryan is still, I mean, full steam ahead. He's always trying to make sure that the voices are always heard.
100%. Ryan is a huge member of that team. I wish I was part of that team. I honestly go down to DC on my own dime so I can advocate along with his team. It kind of puts, so everyone thinks that the VFW is just a bar, right? Or it's a place where old vets go to drink. This puts it into perspective of what we actually do. When we're down there, where our commander-in-chief is testifying in front of the joint House and Senate, and that room is packed. There's an overflow room that is packed all with VFW members to support him. They're knocking on doors and visiting your senators and your congressmen and having one-on-one with either them or their staff, and making them see your point of view to help veterans, to help other vets that don't have that voice. It's very humbling, and it puts things definitely into perspective.
We have a question here from Johnny Boy, one of our excellent callers here. He says, question for the panel: when going from active to being back into civilian life, are you guys seeing more programs to help with the transition? Ryan.
Oh, I thought it was going to go to Maddie. Maddie's, which I do got to say, so last week it was the same day as so we were there Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday was like the big lobbying day. But Tuesday morning was the commander-in-chief, outlet part. He was testifying, and I ended up in the overflow room, and I was just like taking my time. No, actually, me and Colonel Morris were upstairs hanging out, and I just took press tape from but it took us about 20-30 minutes to get out of there. And Maddie's like, where the hell are you?
All the time.
I got lost in the Senate building
for
20-30 minutes. And that wasn't the first time. I also got lost in the House building. No. Actually, no, that was the House building. In the Senate building, she had to come back in. So it was the Senate. No, it was the Senate building. I was standing outside the Senate store. The Senate store. And you were like, just stay right there. So I was like a child. And she had to come find me. But that's how we are. We work together as a team. And I got to give you a perfect example. And this is what we do, which I let me just stop there for a second and just say it, is that Maddie's right. We're not, example, like organizations like the VFW. We're not an organization, people think a bunch of old and sitting at a bar drinking. Towards this more than that. I always like to push out the core values. Advocacy, that's always like sort of my route. The legislative process, assistance, that's Maddie right there. Benefits, claims, camaraderie. That's important because ultimately that's where we pull together and work together. And I always love to add community in there because it's not just a closed door thing. We work with our respective communities. Maddie's post is upstate. What is it, Poughkeepsie? I believe.
I'm in Poughkeepsie.
Ryan, that's not the
and then my in Queen. So
it's all good. We'll get there.
Yeah, I know. You know what? Okay.
Get him, Eddie.
So Eddie knows me well enough, but
yeah, this is me and him.
But the programs, but to answer. Thank you, Eddie. You see, this is my man right here. He keeps me on point. There's programs out there, but I think there's like a few issues. One, there's too many. I think what's the saying? There's too many cooks in the kitchen. There's too many programs. I think that's part of the issue where it can get a little bit confusing for somebody getting out. To answer your question, Johnny, and that's the thing, veterans, well, we're still in the military, we're so used to having things just straightforward. I think maybe Maddie can kind of speak more on that too, because she knows it. But there's different programs. They tend to be at the municipal level, say like New York City or Poughkeepsie, the state, New York State, or Alabama or California, and federal. But there's a lot of stuff out there. I think it's gotten better, but there's still gaps in the system that can still be fixed.
Yeah. So with that was one of the legislation things that we were presenting down in DC, and it's to get service officers in the TAP classes. So I personally do the TAP classes at West Point. I haven't done them in a couple months, maybe 6 months, but they have one every 2 weeks. As far as getting out, there's programs out there, but I know, like, from my end, when I got out, I wanted nothing to do with anything military. Absolutely nothing. And a lot of the military personnel getting out now are the same way. So they don't want to admit that they need help, or they don't want to go searching for these programs to get back on your feet because they can do it themselves. So I think my main thing is to tell service members getting out, accept whatever help you need, look for the programs, whether it's MHA, whether it's the Dwyer program, which they coincide with each other. If it's the VFW, if it's the American Legion, it doesn't matter. Just go in and talk to somebody.
It's immense when you have that crutch to lean on, right? Like, I know with PTSD and depression, sometimes people don't want to talk about these things. But I could only imagine that in the VFW, where, like, just Maddie, you were saying, it's, just to talk to people, just to be that individual. Are there certain centers across the nation where you can guide people that are watching right now, where they can link up, they could call, or somewhere where you could advocate? Maybe after the show, I could place it within the description.
Yeah, so at least here in Queens, where I live, there's a Queens Vet Center. Really good resources there.
Mental Health America is big. I know here in upstate we have Mental Health America and Vet to Vet work together, and it's a veterans helping veterans. Your counties, every county has a veterans liaison.
Mm-hmm.
So there's somebody definitely to reach out to. There was another question there, and I don't remember what it was.
Well, what with Nate there, I'm sorry, I thought that was a question as well. I know there was another one in there.
Yeah, I'm looking for it.
Oh yes, here we go, Johnny boy. I live in Virginia and have seen a lot more programs now with transition compared to like 10 years ago. I think that's relatively true, right? I mean, there wasn't a lot of help before, but now it's coming to the forefront. Would you guys attest to that there's more help out there?
100%. I know when I got out, they gave me my DD 214 and said, "Have a nice day."
Oh,
there was no TAP class. There was nothing.
Now, Maddie, if I could ask you something real quick, what was, in your opinion, the biggest challenge after coming out?
I think it was readjusting to civilian life, not having that family around you. When I got out, I wound up moving in with my grandmother, and it was just me and her. And it wasn't, in the military, you're surrounded by people. There's someone who always has your back. You are given 3 meals, well, in the Navy, 4 meals a day. You're given the clothes that you have to wear. You're given everything you need to survive, and then it's all ripped from you. So that's the biggest adjustment I think there is getting back into feeling like a person again.
Right. Yeah. Making your own choices, putting on whatever you want to wear. And yeah, I got you.
Guys, I
Now, I
tell
guess,
you what caused me the most anxiety here
Yeah.
recently is
yeah.
our office had requested that we wear business casual. I freaked out for a good 3 hours because I didn't know what I was doing.
What'd you end up going with?
Found some old Navy pants and a button-down flannel. Called it good.
Yeah. Perfect. So I want to pass that. I want to pass that same question to Eddie real quick. Eddie, what was the biggest adjustment for you after coming out?
I feel like for me, it was a little bit different. It was just coming out of the Marines. The biggest adjustment for me was probably just I don't know, like later on in life is when it really hit me. But when I first got out, like I knew I came out with a family, so I already had like focus. Like, okay, I gotta come out, get a job, go to school, provide for my family. So I already had kind of like, but I think maybe it's like the like what Maddie was saying, the lack of regimentation. You go to school and it's like, all right, in the military you're supposed to be here at a certain time. When I was going to college, maybe the professor showed up a few minutes early, a few minutes late, and that totally drove me nuts. It, the lack of respect sometimes too, like the way people talk to each other and superiors. I mean, the Marine Corps, brotherhood is a big thing. We have so many different ways of expressing that, and I think that's probably initially what I found out that was the hardest thing was just from leaving a regimented life where like Madison was saying, they told you where to be, they told you how to act, they gave you your whole culture, pretty much everything. So I went from being at home with my mom after high school, then going to the military, and then getting out. I'm like, okay, so it didn't hit me immediately because, like I was telling you, I had a family, so my focus was like, all right, I need to do this. I need to hurry up. And then later on is when I realized I'm like, man, maybe I should have taken my time because by the time I graduated college, I was a little burnt out. I took a year before I went to law school, and then 1 year turned to two turned to three was four, then six. So that's probably for me. Like it, just the taking away of that support. And like I feel a little bit more fortunate than Maddie because I at least got 4 days. Before they gave me my papers and sent me home.
Now, Eddie, what is going through your mind during those 4 days? When you're getting ready to get out.
I felt like it was a waste of time. Like because they spent all this money, all this, like in the Marine Corps boot camp is 3 months long, and in those 3 months, the indoctrination is insane because they teach you so much, and even after that, you have to go to what's called Marine Combat Training. Or at least when I went through, that's what it was called. Now it's different things. They tack on more schools and it's different tests. And then I went to my job, the school for my job, which out in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. So yeah, for me, I'm like, man, this is a waste of time. They in 4 months, in 4 days, I'm not gonna unlearn
Right.
what I learned in my whole time there, and even those 3 months at boot camp. So in a way, like, but I was sitting there, like I was telling you, just thinking about my family, and then also something kept popping up, like, damn, I'm getting out. In those days, Facebook was just opened up to everybody. Before that, it was just for college, university students. So I would see my friends. I'm like, oh my god, this guy's graduating from Syracuse. This guy went to, he went to Cornell. And I felt like, oh man, I'm like, I'm behind, and I felt like I needed to catch up. Which, for me, that's probably one of the reasons why I got burnt out. But it's just like it's that Marine mentality, man. You said the important thing was the mission. You know, you're gonna lose people along the way as long as you complete the mission. And I guess in my mission, I kind of lost myself. But thankfully, I've been little by little, like I came back.
Awesome.
So piggybacking off of that, right? I had a question for Maddie, Ryan, and Eddie, because Nate, you're still in. Was there any point when you were discharged after maybe a week, 2 weeks, let's say, maybe a year after, that you just wanted to re-enlist and just go back? Well, Maddie, we'll start with you.
Oh yeah, there was definitely times. I mean,
Oh yeah,
even now,
you have Maddie.
even now, you have that passing thought that like I should go back in. Everything is paid for. Everything is taken care of. I don't have to worry about anything. But in I'd like to be in that shape again. But in reality, I wouldn't give up my life for anything right now.
Ryan?
Yeah, no, it crossed my mind, at least for a few years after I got out. That was it was a tough transition for me because, and honestly, I think the biggest was finding. Listen, I'd say it probably it's still around somewhat, but like one of the first things, you served in the military. First thing people think about is firing weapons, killing people, all this stuff, but it's more than that. But yeah, I don't know how many job fairs I went to, and I remember one I went to was in Manhattan, and I showed him my resume. I had a background in procurement, supply chain, and big company. I'm not going to say who it was, and they were taking candidates more serious, kids right out of college, compared to actual OJT, on the job training, and and then of course they pointed me in a direction of, oh, why don't you go over there, the security table, security companies. Mm-hmm. I didn't do security in the military. As all of us, we have different jobs in the military. It's like its own self-sustaining city. Everyone has anything from culinary specialist to supply chain to vehicle operations to whatever. And my morale dropped down. I thought about, I'm like, oh man, I might as well go back in or look for a contracting job. That was a big thing at the time. Even now, as a contractor, hell, you spend a year in the Middle East, in Afghanistan, Iraq at the time, making six figures, tax-free. Yeah, you're leaving, there's some sort of, it's not relatively safe, but you're coming back home and things change. And what we tend to do is we look at the past. We look at our days in high school. We look at our time in the military, but guess what? That's the past. Now we got to start looking today and forward. But it kind of sucks when the system is set up sort of like a dog and pony show. And yeah, I mean, it sucked for me. I mean, I had a lot of dark days, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna go back in. Screw this. New York City's not for me anymore. I was born and raised here, but guess what? You don't want me anymore. So that was kind of going through my mind.
Eddie?
Oh yeah, I mean, the thought always crossed my mind. Even now, like sometimes, with what's going on in the world, I have an 18-year-old son, and I look at him like, damn, maybe I should get into shape also. So in case they call him, I'll go along too with him, But in case he gets drafted, I'll go along too. So, but once in a while, yeah, I'll look in the closet. I'll run my hand down my old uniforms, touch the medals, toggle with the buttons, look at the pictures, and it does get pretty nostalgic, And then it gets, for me, it's emotional. I'm an emotional guy. I'm sensitive, and it's taken me a long time to be able to turn that back on. In the military, they teach you how to turn it off, but not really how to turn it on. And then, like, when you come out here, your family sees how you are, and they're understanding what's going on with you. They're trying to understand. But back to the question, yeah, I thought about it a lot because, like Ryan was saying, you have some pretty bad days. Like, when I first got out in my mission, I took a security job, some really bad security jobs, but and it sucked. And I always thought, like, damn man, right now I'd be a sergeant. Being in Iraq is easier than this. Being in the desert, I'd rather be out there right now. Things like that. But what always brought me back down was like faith. If I just kept on with it, if I put my head down, worked hard, grinded hard, eventually I'd be rewarded. So that's probably what made me also keep going. It's the faith and hope that things get better.
Mhm.
But that was always in the back of my mind too. Remember, I didn't want to leave.
Right.
I didn't want to leave, but at the same time, I have had a family to it, and then my wife, which, in my opinion, is and I feel like it's the spouses, it's your family that suffers the worst than you. You go off and you're like doing whatever, but at home, your family is your mom, your grandmother, your wife. They're wondering all hours of the night, watching every little single video, news clipping that comes out. Like,
Mhm.
my family's superstitious, so for me, it was my mom was like, one day we had this grandfather clock that had not worked for years, but for some reason around 9 a.m. in the morning, it starts going ding dong ding, and then my picture that my mom had up on the wall of me in my graduation picture from boot camp, my mom said that the photo fell off the wall. So she's there with my aunt, my grandma. Like, picture this, like this grandfather clock going off in the middle of the night, in the morning, ding dong. This picture falling off of your son. All of a sudden, like, you got like seven ladies crying, oh my goodness, praying for you. And I just, when they related that story to me, I had to laugh. And like, why are you laughing? It's not funny. But yeah, I for a while I thought about it. Now I'm just like, now I'm into what I'm doing now. So
Right.
I still worry though, because I've got an 18-year-old. Way things are going, he actually just, the selected service card came in the mail, and for me, I'm like, wow, I hadn't seen this in a while, and that's what brought it back down to earth for me. I've been out of the military, outside of the wars for a while, but this brought me back down, and I'm like, maybe I need to get in better shape. So maybe I can go fight if he gets called up too. I don't know, but that's what I thought.
Fantastic. Now we're going to bring up Johnny Boy, one of our excellent callers here. It's as professional as it gets here. All right. So
What's up, Johnny?
Hey, how you guys doing? First and foremost, thank you guys so much for your guys' service, man. I really, really do appreciate all the sacrifice you guys have done. And I live in Virginia, so we have it's a very giant military state over here. I live in Virginia Beach, so I am surrounded by different bases out here. Oceana, Janif,
NOB.
for uses, NOB, and everything. So I've
Middle Creek.
grown up in the area, and I have friends that have gone out, come back, transition from being active, going into that. So for you guys speaking on that, kudos to you guys, and I really, really appreciate that. I'm learning so much just from hearing your guys' stories and what you guys are telling, and to everybody that's watching, man, they need to hit the like, but need to understand too, like what's going on, because you guys are around, you guys all look around my age and everything, so to be able to have an understanding of it it's amazing. So appreciate you guys a lot.
awesome.
Hey, Johnny, I got a question for you. How does it feel? How does it feel to be a Jets fan in Redskin country?
It's so my best friend, right? So funny story. Dan knows what I'm about to talk about. So Dan sent me a Afterburners merch that's they're going to be doing on the store and everything pretty soon.
Heck yeah.
And he was like, "Hey, I'm gonna send you the Redskins colors and everything for you and all that because I know you're surrounded by that." But the funny thing, right? I'm originally from New York. I'm a Long Island kid, and I never liked the Giants. I never liked the Eagles at all, and I could not stand the Cowboys. Right? So sorry if any of you guys are any of those fans, right? So I always liked the Redskins. You know, I remember when they had what's his name? I think it was when they had Champ Bailey, right? When I was going in middle school and all that, and I was like, man, if I wasn't a Jet fan, that's probably be the team that I would go ahead and want to root for. But there's a big Jets following out here in Virginia. We're like 5,000 strong out here.
Dang.
So because you get a lot of people that are from up north that are in the military out here as well too. So, but yeah,
Love that. Nate, I have a question for you.
Yep.
You're still active. Now, is there ever a point where you just want to say, you know what, that's it. I did my time. I got to leave. I have to do what I need to do. I need to move forward. Or is it that's not even a speck of a thought of leaving?
I have that conversation probably once a week, to be honest. But I mean, I've got some really good mentors. Before I keep going, though, I am just gonna say, I'm sure you guys are aware, we got some money votes going on over in DC, and that does affect my day to day. So I'm gonna hop off here in a few minutes and tackle some real world issues that's gonna happen at the schoolhouse for me. But as a service member, and this kind of came up yesterday in our big organic class. We got a class of 365 senior NCOs from every branch of the military and international right now. And burnout and those things, when you're in from 16 to 19 years, is kind of our average of the students at the moment. Those are real conversations. Like Eddie said, with family, like, making that decision is hard, but having a military family is also hard. Like it's a lot of stuff you got to weigh to do this job. And we don't even really call it a job. We call it a profession of arms because it's a calling, and you can still hear it in the voices of Maddie, Ryan, and Eddie, right? Like they are still serving. We sit here and we're nodding our heads and we're smiling because even though we served in different branches, like when they're saying something, I know exactly what that means. And to your point, Dan, when we talk about PTSD and having help, like having that relatability, having that, outlet, like, Eddie and I, we've only met virtually a few times, but he and I could easily go out and have a conversation and figure out what was going on and relate it to something that we've experienced. Because like what they were talking about, we're on a sports podcast. When you hear guys retire in the sports realm, they tell you, hey, I don't miss the practices. I don't miss the two-a-days. I don't miss the meetings. I don't miss the studying, but you miss the guys in the locker room, and that's what, I equate my military life and my family to, my military family, but my family with my military family. There's not many places that you can work or be a part of to where you transition to a new place and you're automatically accepted. Last year when we talked at this time, I was in Hawaii and now I'm in Alabama, and I've been here for 5 months. Yet, like, I get here, people understand who I am and my experience, and it's a quick plug-in. I don't, like they're saying, the hard part for these guys to get out is there's no quick plug-in. There's no family team, or even at least, dysfunctional family camaraderie to go join. And that's the part, that is hard. And that's where, I wanted to help. Ryan and I go back all the way to Langley Air Force Base in 2007 is where we met. And, because of Facebook, like Eddie said, we got to keep in touch. And, I've seen some of the stuff that he's done at the VFW there with his community outreach. And that's the stuff that we would still talk about today, and that's what wanted me to help out his organization. It wasn't just because I'm a military guy, it's because he was doing different programs within his community, and that's something that is it feels good to me. So and that's what I want to do. And that's how I view my service. So yeah, when you ask, are there days and probably weeks that I question of, you know what, I could do this on the outside. I could be done, but I'm not there yet. And I've had a lot of mentors that tell me when your time is done, you will know that you don't have anything left to give.
Wow.
I appreciate that, Nate. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I just want to
Well-
say I appreciate you guys.
Well-
I appreciate you, Liam and Dan. Thanks for having me on. I do got to step out here in a second.
of
I
course.
appreciate everybody at the Afterburners. Green and white's not my color, purple and gold for me, but I appreciate your guys' sports fandom, and I appreciate your guys' support to the veteran community. Like it doing this and talking to you now for a second time. Like I truly appreciate it. So I thank you guys as well.
We appreciate you, man.
course.
Always.
Yeah, this is awesome being able to hear you guys' story and all that. And Nate,
No, there you are.
Nate, I wanted to ask you, because you said you went from Hawaii to Alabama, right? And this is probably for everybody. Do you see the difference from like state to state when you go? Like, I don't know if you get stationed somewhere else or if you go back home. Like, is there a big difference of kind of like people being able to say they could relate to you, or that, or am I just bugging out when I'm talking in regards to that?
Not in the veteran community. It's very easy. State to state, we're country to country. Everybody's got their own things in those communities, but I go home and I talk to people that I haven't spoken with in high school that have joined other branches of the service, and it's like that. It's super easy. But Johnny Boy, thanks for your support as well. Guys, I am going to bow out here now. Again, thank you for having me. Super appreciate it. I would gladly come back anytime you guys welcome me back. Thank you.
Sure.
Without a doubt. Thank you for everything, my man.
Thank you very much, Nate.
You got it. Now, without further ado, we're going to bring on Tyson Roush.
I should bring on Nate when the Jets.
Oh, give me 1 second. Tyson, what's going on?
Good evening. How you guys doing?
Pretty
What's up, Tyson?
good. Again, for those of you that don't know, Tyson Roush, he's one of the premier Jets content creators in the business at Let's Talk Jets YouTube channel, but also an amazing point man in raising psychological, emotional, and mental awareness to the forefront of discussion, and his compassion to so many veterans through his fundraiser towards mental health awareness. The GoFundMe link is provided in the description below. So Tyson, thank you so much for coming on, brother.
Thank you for having me, man. This is awesome.
At least we didn't call him old this time.
I know, like
We
after
didn't.
that introduction, man, I feel like I'm obligated to do something important here. Like, what am I supposed to do now?
Now, I want to share
You do
this
so much,
here.
man.
I want to share this here for those of you that are watching. Tyson, you're going to be in the Jersey City Marathon.
Yes, sir. Yeah. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to raise mental health awareness and support for our veterans by running the Jersey City Marathon, something I've never done before. So I've been training about 3 months so far, ran over 350 miles preparing. So I'm doing the best I can. I have a GoFundMe. I'm also selling T-shirts and just overall trying to raise a lot of awareness, man. So that's my goal. And I really appreciate you guys taking time to like help promote it and spread the word. I genuinely appreciate it. And as of today, I've raised over $3,000. So I'm making some progress.
Awesome.
Absolutely. And again, as I said, the link is in the description below. And we're just tying everything in here. Again, Tyson, we have Maddie, Ryan, Eddie. Nate just left just now. He had some things to do, but yeah, we're going really deep in here, and they're sharing amazing stories right now. And it came at a perfect time because we really wanted to dive into PTSD. About over a year ago, my good friend Kyle, who Ryan knows as well, we knew each other for a very long time. We grew up together. He went into the Army. Everything was great, no issues. But unfortunately, there was an underlining problem that not a lot of us knew, and it was depression. It was PTSD, and unfortunately, with a heavy heart, he passed away. He took his life, and I know me and the family also. We think, what could we have done differently? Is there something that we could have been there for him, just a little bit more? What if he was here right now? If I could just tap into his mind and tell him that there are better options out there. That's what I wanted to ask the panel. And Maddie, I want to start with you as well. Those thoughts and whatnot, where you come across individuals or maybe yourself and whatnot, how do you cope with that? What are certain mechanisms that you're like, all right, you know what? Wait, if I continue this trajectory with my thought process, it's going to go into the wrong direction. I need to reassess and regear.
I think that getting that help definitely helped. But a lot of people aren't willing to do that. Having a veteran support system is huge. Mine was a little different. Mine's MST. So the more that I started a women's veterans group, and the more that I talked about my story, I realized that it had less power over me. Mm-hmm. And the more it allowed people to tell their story so that it wasn't taking over their thoughts. So that's kind of how I slowly evolved. But it did take a long time to get there. We lost somebody in the VFW a couple years ago. He was a close friend of mine. And I would talk to him regularly on the phone. I would get him help. I would send other VFW members to his house to make sure he was okay whenever he was on that cliff. And outside of standing over somebody, watching them 24 hours a day, you never know what's going to happen. And I just urge veterans to go get that help, go talk to somebody, whether it's your service officer or whether it's a psych or a therapist. You're not alone. You're definitely not alone.
I feel like that's the common denominator, right? Where that's where a lot of people feel. I know I felt like that, like, shoot, there's no one out there to help me. There's no one out there to see me eye to eye. When you're able to break free of that and see that there are great individuals, again, someone like Liam, Ryan, Tyson, Johnny Boy, who, I sometimes speak beyond this platform. People that care, that are genuine. I think that's one of the first barricades, right? To know and to think, does this person really care about what I'm about to share with them? Something intimate. Is he going to think different of me? Like, what's the psychological perspectives that you have to gauge in order to cross that bridge? Ryan, I wanted to ask you that question. Like, how do you confide in someone in order to pour your heart out?
Oh man. Trust. It takes time to build up trust, and it's and I know, Dan, we've spoken about this plenty of times, that it's not just a military or veteran thing. It's a everybody thing. And it just comes down to trust, and even stuff being it could be as simple as a good morning, or a hello, or a smile. You never know what somebody's going through. Like I say, you don't have to be in the military. Dan, it could be you, Liam, Tyson. Mental health it's an everybody issue, and we don't know what's going on in somebody's head, and it's considered like a taboo thing. Like, oh, God forbid, oh, I say something, and I don't know the names for it, but if before PTSD or PTS, like it sort of really came to the forefront following 9/11 and the global war on terror operations, Iraq, Afghanistan, other places. there was different terms for it. Like I can't think of it. I think one of them was like shell shock. If you look at like the term they used in the Civil War 150 years ago here, I forget what it was called, but there's different terms, but there's such a taboo thing. Ultimately, it just comes down to trust, and it really gets down to the grassroots level, whether it is at a VFW post, a Legion, or even maybe a town hall, or little things, or big things. Really, I mean, what Tyson's doing, and where his campaign, it's okay to not be okay. I mean, stuff like that. That's how you build up trust. And and I'll say this, Dan. Just a quick little story. So when me and Maddie, we came back from DC last week, I always like to stay at the grassroots level. And so my post, located in Corona, right up the block from Flushing Meadows, where the New York Mets play. We have a few things. We had our post meeting, and then food after, barbecue, whatever. But before that, I work with a local teacher. While she's retired now, she runs this group for middle school and high school kids. And it's based off a bigger charter. And she didn't have a space. And I told her, I said, listen, use our post. And it was a joint event. It was basically these kids, these middle school and high school kids, connecting with veterans. And that's one thing I try to build as a community. So we're not insular. We have to be open out to the community. And kids look up to us. And I tell my members, listen, like we're not just mentors, we're also teachers. And so I'll put it like this. One of my members, I'm not saying names, but he suffers from severe, there's severe mental issues, and this member has good days and bad days, and he was really looking forward to this. And then that's it. His mood shifted that morning. And I left. I went to his house, and I parked out front, and I picked him up. And I'm like blasting Kendrick Lamar out of the car. He's like, Jesus Christ, at like 9 o'clock in the morning. But I purposely wanted to bring him in because this is what we're supposed to do as a community, whether it's just the mill vet community or people in general. But it just comes down to trust. And this person in particular, it took years of trust and taking care of each other. And it's like that with everyone else. I mean, that's the best way I can say it.
Tyson, this here.
Can I piggyback
I'm
off of
sorry.
that for a minute?
Please, by all means.
I want to say be the person that, as far as anyone who wasn't in the military committee, or not committee, been around Ryan too much, community, be that person that somebody can talk to, that somebody can open up to, that you're not going to judge them. You're not going to, I had a psychiatrist look at me and go, I feel so bad for you. And that just shut me up. Like it clammed me up, and I didn't want to speak to him ever again. I didn't want to tell him my story. Don't be, lack of a better term, don't be judgy. Just be that ear that someone wants to talk to.
It's so important to be that person, to make that difference. And that's why I wanted to segue that to Tyson. Tyson, this is something that hits home for you. You do this every year, and it's so inspiring because what you do, it lights a fire, on so many people to say, this is real. Yeah. I just wanted to ask you, what was that spark? Why do you have such a passionate fire to always do this every year?
Well, mental health is near and dear to me because I deal with depression and anxiety myself. But the veteran aspect of it is I'm a coach at an MMA school, and a person came in. He's like, I want to thank you so much, man. I'm like, why? He's like, he has PTSD, and he goes to classes to just be an outlet to help clear his head and do all these things. So we became good friends. We would talk more and more, and he shared stories about, you know, his people that he served with and all these different things and the struggles they have and all the mental aspect and like the lack of support and the lack of, you know, like the lack of help they needed, they weren't getting. I just kept researching it and doing more and more and getting more stories and interacting with people. And it's just like, wow, how is this possible? My father's retired Army. So like I'm a military, I come from a military family, but I just, you know, it's a very serious topic. It's a very serious issue. And right now, unfortunately, in a non-military aspect, far too many teenagers are taking their own lives from cyberbullying, bullying. There's so many problems in the world, and nobody wants to talk about suicide. It's like this taboo topic. Nobody wants to talk about it. If a celebrity does it, they share a hotline for 10 minutes and oh, now on to the next thing. And it's so I just want to raise awareness, man. Help wherever you can. And touching your topic before about trust, which is a really good point. I think it takes a lot of courage too, because to openly admit that you have this problem, you're scared of being judged, you're scared of being called weak, you're scared of all these things. And you're like, you know, as like you say, as a man, you're like, oh, you know, he's timid, he's weak, he has depression or whatever like that. And you're scared to open up. And then you're scared of the reaction. Are they going to understand? Are they not going to understand? So to Maddie's point, it's really true where you've got to be open-minded and listen to their story. You never know. You may be able to relate to it. Who knows? And if you can't help them, say, listen, I wish I could help you. I can't, but how about we go talk to so-and-so? You know, it's fostering an environment of where mental health issues are okay. A variety of people deal with them at different kinds of levels, but it should be an open topic and open conversation. And to Ryan's point, you know, we're glued to our phones every day, all of us. It takes 3 seconds to send a text to your friend you haven't talked to in a while. How you doing, man? Or an email. You're at work. Send a quick email. How's it going? A conversation could be a game changer for somebody, you know, and I've dealt with that too, where a good friend of mine, you know, we always, we got to get a beer one of these days. Got to get one beers. We never caught up. And then for whatever reason, like Dan, you talked about it, I had no idea he was suffering the way he was. And we were really close. And the same situation. I'm like, how did I not know? But I'm like, you know, I didn't know because I didn't take time to reach out and say, hey, you know what? Let's get that beer this week instead of a year from now. So there's a lot of things that go into it, but it's just fostering these conversations, man, that you never know who you can reach out to. Like you guys have this platform on YouTube, which is great. You never know who's watching that. You could be the difference between getting through tonight to tomorrow, which is enormous. You know what I mean?
100%. Liam?
Yeah, absolutely. And I have a question for our veterans here. Me and Dan started talking about, you know, getting these guys back on about a couple weeks ago. And I didn't even tell you anybody about this. About 2 weeks ago, I have a friend that's actually in the Marines right now. He's out in California. And I was gonna bring him on too for this. And I found out that he's actually in rehab. He has a DWI, bad drinking problem. We had no idea. How big is that, you know, like just throughout the military? And like what is there any outlets for that besides, you know, just to help him like when he gets out, or for anybody that's dealing with that in the military?
Liam, I'll answer that. I'll say, unfortunately, I mean, how I seen it, maybe it might be different for Maddie, it might be different for Eddie. Drinking is a very big culture in the military. And you know, it's unfortunately, if you seek help while you're still in, there's repercussions. And it's not just with the substance or alcohol abuse, it's also with things with, say, what Maddie mentioned, MST. These have been issues for years, and it's still plaguing the military as a whole. And I'll give you an example when it comes to mental health. So when I deployed to Baghdad from 05 to 06, right before out processing, like a day or two before you leave, you're hopping a C-130 out of country. You have to go through like a checklist stuff, you know, whatever you got to out process. You got to turn your equipment. You got to go through medical. So there's like these different forms. And one of the things that stood out to me was in the medical form, it was a single sheet and it mentioned stuff related to mental health. I mean, are you having, I don't know, you can't sleep, you're having flashbacks, stuff related to that. For the most part, and Maddie can probably just kind of jump on top of this. She knows this really well. Is that there is this thing where it's like, yeah, if I fill this out, I'm screwed. And I've heard stories time and time again that people have gone for help, and guess what? You're screwed because you want to cross train into another field within your respective branch. Like say if I was material manager, supply, if I wanted to cross train into Intel or something, I'm not going to be able to, because guess what? I got this mark on my record that states that I have mental health issues or I have a drinking problem. So these are things that that it's still a big problem. One of them is, and I'll tell you, she's a big advocate for us. New York, U.S. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand here from New York State. Senator Gillibrand is a big advocate when it comes to MST stuff and other stuff. But there's still issues within the military and trying to create an independent party like a IG to kind of handle that stuff. But it's still like a no-go. Like, you know what? I know Maddie probably did it. You know, I don't know, who knows how many deployments she's had at sea. Eddie too, they had the same thing. So I'm just like, yeah, I'm not filling this out that I'm fucked up in the head. Excuse my language. I'm sorry, guys.
No. It just sparks an interest right now because this is messed up. This is not right. Now that's happening within our military where you guys seek help, but then you guys are branded as, I don't even want to say the word, but is there anything being done? Is there an awareness of that? Because I don't think that's right. I mean, if you're seeking for help and then all of a sudden, let's say you wanted to fly a Apache helicopter and then all of a sudden that's on your paperwork. Yeah. Maddie, what do you have on that? Oh, hello.
You there, Maddie?
Let me jump in. So,
Eddie,
what I think is going on, it's probably like a culture change. When I was going through, and I said this, remember back in those days, it was still a bunch of grizzled, tough Marines, you know. But now I feel like the Marines of now, like they're the ones growing up. They're the ones in command of units of places, so they kind of grew up with this and they kind of know. So I feel like they're a little bit more welcoming of it. If one of their troops comes to them, like, listen, I've got something going on, I need to talk to somebody, they'll be like, oh yeah, no problem, go ahead. But back when I was coming through, it wasn't the same thing. It's like you said, if you said anything like that, they would laugh you out the office. They would, they would be like, yeah, okay, we got to send you back or something, So I think that's what's happening now. It's like some of the service members, even not just Marines, but some of the people that came up and suffered from these things and just couldn't find an outlet for it without being judged, or couldn't find a support for it, are the ones that are probably spearheading this now, where they're the ones saying, okay, well, I know what it felt like to be that private. I know what it felt like to be that, that sergeant, not knowing where to go. And really, I don't want my troops to suffer the same way I did. So I feel like there's some of that going on now too.
Yeah, that could be a big positive.
Now, do you, playing devil's advocate, looking at it from their side, right? And this is horrible to even think, because to me, there's no excuse. If someone needs help, they need help. Or on that side, do you think that they're looking at filtering soldiers out, saying, you know what, we can't depend on these soldiers if they come up to us to ask for help in order to complete like a mission or whatnot? Is that the mentality from that side, or am I seeing this completely incorrectly?
See, well, let me go on top of that. What Eddie was saying, when you have the old timers, now we're talking about people that were already NCOs, senior NCOs, when 9/11 hit, and then people like Maddie, Eddie, myself, Nate, when we joined, we're brand new, whatever. We just joined after 9/11. And we're talking about guys that are people in leadership position that they've been in for a while, maybe 10 years, maybe more. There really wasn't much going on. And really there are a few, 1, 2, maybe 3 steps in the higher up in the echelon, and they're not down on the ground boots on the ground example, Eddie can tell you some stories. I mean, I'm sorry to point you out there, bud. And they're pushing. Oh yeah, we got to get out there and do whatever, but they've never experienced what it was like to be on the ground because there wasn't really any big operations prior to 9/11. I mean, there was a few kinetic things, but like I think Eddie mentioned, is that with the guard coming in, that's in the higher echelon, the higher ranks, they have a different mindset because we're talking about people. I guarantee if Eddie stayed in, he was only in 4 years. He did 2 deployments, including the Battle of Fallujah. They had at least minimum half a dozen deployments under his belt, and you're talking that can just really drive down morale. And Nathan spoke about it before. Family's a big thing. Like the people that continuously talk about, oh yeah, this is what the military's for. But guess what? The human element, we're still human. We still have, it's like work. We get off our shift and we have our own time, whether it's with our family or we want to decompress somehow. And, that's really important. There's a morale aspect to what we do. Listen, we're not RoboCop. We're not. This is not something that people see in the movies that, like where we can operate 24/7. No, we're human ultimately.
Now I wanted to ask. Oh, go for it, Liam.
Go ahead.
So I wanted to ask again. Many of us, we've had parents and whatnot that have gone into the military. My parents have not. But that's what my question is here to the panel. And if I'm crossing the line, I do apologize. I just want to know that mindset of growing up in that environment of having either your mom or your dad that have served. What was that like? Were they sharing stories about their experience? Or was it just, it was so dark that they would file it away? Tyson, I wanted to ask you that.
My father, I mean, he was very regimented, very disciplined. I think he shared what he thought was appropriate for me. I think he probably shared more with my mother than he did with me. He kind of protected me from a lot of things. So, I think that's kind of where he went. And he served for, I don't know how many years, a long time. But I think as he got older and I got older, I think he opened up a little bit more and kind of shed a little more light. But early when I was much younger, he didn't really say much at all. He kind of kept it all inside.
Ryan?
Well, I do have to point out there's also the civilian aspect. So, knowing you and your background, to me, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Your parents, they probably fled a wartime. We're talking World War II, Mussolini, fascist dictatorship. So yeah, there is also the human element where people will leave. And I hate to put Eddie's business out there. His background, going back years, his grandmother carried him here over the border. And guess what? We're back in the 80s. That's when Salvador was going through a very large civil war. So I mean, there is that aspect of it's not just people actually fighting the wars itself, but it's also the civilian element that they flee or they fight. It's that you got 2 choices.
Eddie, wanted to ask you that same question.
So I didn't have parents that served in the military, but I have 2 brothers who did, so I can share as a brother. And what's interesting, and I just realized right now that I'm a father now, and I actually don't share anything with my family about it. So they know I'm involved with the VFW. You ask my daughter, oh, well, he was in the Marines. What did he do? I don't know. Because there's some things like Tyson was saying. You just share what's appropriate, and when I'm But if they were to ask me, I would definitely share more, especially with my oldest one. But he's in college now, so he's only interested in going to class, sneaking alcohol into the. So, but that's interesting because I really haven't shared, mostly because when I gauge their interest, I feel like, oh, they're not interested in what I have to say. Or but my wife, she's like, oh my god, there goes Eddie again telling his stories about that one time in Iraq, so which to me it's a big deal, but to them it's like because they don't understand. But the question is, how do you bring them into that? How do you. So for me, that's been the question, and I realize now that I really haven't shared anything. And Ryan was telling me too that his dad was the same way. Like his father never shared nothing with him. It was only like later on, till when he started doing his research, that he figured out, oh man, my dad was in the Air Force. My dad served with Chuck Norris. Things like that.
But Dick, can I say one more thing too? It's like Ryan made a really, really good point, and I could probably I fell in this category too. Is I think when you know somebody's in the military, you think RoboCop, you think they're this military. I'm not saying machine, but like you're this. You just handle business, and there is no issues. You come back and everything's fine, and you move on. Like we kind of assume a lot of things as civilians that just how it works, and we don't put the thought into all the aftermath of it until somebody actually shares a story. Like, wow, shit! Sorry. I mean, I didn't know that. You know what I mean? Like that's like when, like we assume a lot of things as civilians, that just how it works out until we find out more and more on a personal level or impact somebody that we know, so it's a really interesting conversation, to be honest. Because now I'm thinking about it, like I never, with my father, he like, oh, I went here. Okay, cool. You're like, oh, cool. I'm glad you're back and take care. Let's go to a ball game. Like you don't even you don't process what actually happened. I think a lot of people do that. You know what I mean?
Do you think it's more of like a situation where it's like, oh, dad's telling his war stories again, like rather than putting yourself in this position of the person that was there?
I mean, like I said, he didn't open. I would love, I hear them now, but like I would, I think sometimes I don't know why we don't ask more, or maybe I didn't have enough of an interest where I should have personally. It's just like you get caught up. Like I don't know. It's a really interesting conversation. I never really even thought about it before. When he does it now, like as you mature and get older, you obviously want to learn more, be a part of more, and figure things out. So now he talks. Now I'll sit down for 4 hours. I don't care. But back earlier on, I didn't really think that. I was more like, all right, when are we going to do family time? When are we going to do this? Like, it's almost like you had your time, I want mine now. That kind of situation. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So it's really interesting to think of the whole RoboCop thing, Ryan. That's an excellent point.
Hey,
well, I do have thanks, Tyson. I do have to say this. Well, if you definitely want to hear stories, definitely ask Eddie about his MRE story covered in his little patty. You know what I'm talking about. In the middle of Fallujah.
Listen, that it added taste, it added flavor to it. The chicken patty is pretty bland. Something about the Iraqi soil, the Iraqi sand gives it flavor. Anyway, so let me tell you the story quickly. So I was eating an MRE. I couldn't open it, so I mustered up all my strength, and I pulled this MRE open, and the patty flew up into the air, and then it fell down on the floor, on the ground, on the deck. In the Marine Corps, we say deck. Mm-hmm. So in Fallujah, the ground over there is sand, ash, whatever else is on the street. So I took this patty. It was like dark. So I'm like, man, I'm so hungry. I want to eat it. I took my canteen and I washed it off, brushed it off, and I ate it. And let me tell you, like, this thing tasted so good. Something about it just seasoned it. I don't know. And I like sazon,
Hey, so yeah. So first off, Tyson, it's nice to meet you, man. I've first and foremost, bro, what you're doing is amazing, dude. I see a lot of the stuff that you do put out. And hey, man, you're completely right when you say that it could be one person that needs it that day. It's the truth, man. So thank you so much for what you do and all that. So without kind of saying some of the stuff that I do, because I don't want to put my stuff out there like that and everything. But I was talking to Dan before, and Dan kind of knows what I do off of this, right? And I sit on a board, and kind of you were talking in regards to not really knowing as a civilian, because I'm a civilian, right? I don't have no military background. I really didn't know, right, about being branded a certain way after you have these things that they put on your stuff. I forgot what it is, but we give donations, grants, stuff that we get from the state to the veterans that are homeless program that's like all around here. And we go out and we speak to a lot of them. And these guys are like highly decorated individuals that were in the military, and you see them and you're like, how did this happen? And they say stuff to the where, like, you know, something happened and I was branded with this or this illness, as they, you know, I see one person told me and whatnot. He couldn't get a job, like nothing. He couldn't even get a job at like Walmart and all that, and had a family, you know, everything, et cetera, and divorced, you know, kids didn't end up not liking him. Stuff that you don't really hear about very often. And this opened up my eyes to a lot of this, because there's a giant population of homeless individuals that are ex-military and that are really forgotten about and are not talked about on an everyday base, which you know, it's insane to me to see it and to hear them. And I couldn't believe the stuff that they went through and everything. And then it's just like as if they were just thrown essentially almost to the side, and was like, you know, they still get some money, right, from being like, I think like the medically discharged or whatever it is, right, or disability. I'm not 100% sure on it, but it's not enough, and they just don't know what to do. Is that something that, the reason I'm saying all of this is because of the whole piece of the RoboCop situation? Because you think of them, somebody in the military, you think they're just like that. They got it all done. They got it all made. Like it's good. And it's not, I guess, maybe like that. I just wanted to get your guys' thoughts. Have you guys ran into that? Have you seen different things? And are there other programs? I could only speak for what's out here in Virginia that I'm able to be a part of and try to help out. But is that stuff that you guys are seeing around your way?
Well, I think
we
right
lost
now,
Maddie. Maddie's coming back. Oh, sorry.
Right now we're starting to see it, and at least here in New York City, what was going on is like, yeah, there was some resources, but not enough outreach or not enough advertisement was made for them, so guys didn't know where to go. And also in New York City, veterans really don't self-identify. You know, we're not gonna go and tell somebody, "Oh, I'm a veteran. I need help." You know, so now what's going on now? It's like the people in place now at some of these agencies, they're actually going out. They're looking for veterans, and a lot of times are veterans themselves. So like what Ryan and I do, it's like we know what to look for now, you know, and we know where to find them. We know, you know, through being veterans too, we establish connections, and you know, and Ryan can talk, so he's pretty good at, you know, establishing connections and getting somebody really comfortable with them right away. But that's what we've been noticing too a lot before. The resources are there, but veterans are just reluctant to seek those things out. And then it'll take somebody like what Ryan was talking about to go out there and get you, hold you by the hand and bring you in. So, but that's what we're seeing a lot of now. There's been a lot of effort to go out there.
Well, obviously outside of the VFW and whatever hats I wear at the local level in Queens, and like I said, advocacy, that's like sort of my wheelhouse. You know, whether I'm sort of the point man from the legislature for New York City for the Department of New York, VFW for our headquarters in Albany, and I'm the vice chair for the state. I'm on the National Legislative Committee. But I also sit on the New York City Veterans Advisory Board. So it's a 13-member board appointed by the mayor, the speaker of the city council. The there's not too many resources that pump into, well, I'm a numbers guy, so I'll tell you the deal. So the budget for the city that the city council pushes forward and the mayor signs off on is around $110 billion. That's a lot of freaking money. The New York City Department of Veterans Agency, it came into existence about close to 10 years ago, and I'll say it outright. Mayor de Blasio was not a great mayor. He felt there was no need for the agency. At the time, there was the mayor's office for Veterans Affairs, but we were on the ground and we pushed them. The issue that we've been having is funding the agency. Right now, it's only getting $6 million. And put it into like math terms, it's literally like 0.00001 or 5% of the total budget of $110 billion. We got a great commissioner for the New York City Department of Veteran Services, James Hendon, who himself he's a West Pointer, Afghanistan vet, and he's actually still in the military. He's a full bird colonel. And James is a great guy. He's doing as much as he can with the resources he has. But unfortunately, we don't get much support in the city council. We do have some people locally, like Councilman Bob Holden, Vicky Palladino, Joanne Areola, who's out of Howard Beach. And they're really good, but we don't get much support. Out of 51 seats, there's not a single veteran. You got to have some sort of representation to kind of somebody to push stuff like veterans policy. But they don't get much. But we're, the commissioner is doing a great job working his end. In fact, through the Paul Vallone initiative, I don't know if some of you guys New Yorkers, Dan, if you know the Vallone name, Paul Vallone, Peter Vallone, there was their father. They're politicians, city council, state legislature. Paul, unfortunately, we lost last the commissioner for the agency, but and Maddie can probably speak on this now that we finally got her back. Great to see you, Maddie. Is that now some money's pumping into, it's okay. It's pumping into bringing, not internally within the agency, but looking at the nonprofit side, VFW, which we're a nonprofit, into the tip of the spear, people like Maddie, to kind of run claims and benefits referrals and stuff like that. There's resources, but it's a little bit difficult. So there's the VA side, the federal side. We have the Brooklyn VA in Fort Hamilton. We have 23rd Street, Manhattan, the Peterson Center in the Bronx, St. Albans here in Queens. There's the vet centers. We got the one in Queens and Ridgewood. There's one in Brooklyn, I think one in Harlem, one in the Bronx. But then outside of that, there's not too much money being pumped into it. It's a lot of this, I like to call it handshakes and cakes. Thank you for your service. Some elected officials, since this is my wheelhouse, some probably won't talk to me anymore because I tell them enough with the street sign renamings, enough with the monuments. That's nice and all. It's secondary. Honestly, it would be nice to have Kyle's name up somewhere. But one of the things that I always try to push forward is one of the mottos for the VFW: honor the dead by helping the living. Listen, I'd say it, I'm very rough in my language. We lose people who are still in, whether on the battlefield or we lose them to, they have internal struggles when they get out. But we need to forward, and we need to carry their name forward and put the resources in the right place that really targets mental health and stuff. And I'll just say this, and I'll shut up. How important Maddie's role is on the veteran service side, the assistance side, part of our core values. Mental health struggles will never be resolved. Let's just face the truth. It can never be fixed, but we can mitigate it as much as possible. If Maddie can get a veteran put in their compensation package their disability for various things, it could be physical injuries, it could be mental health, and say they get rated at 100%, that money that they will receive every month to support themselves, it can be less of a burden off of their day-to-day living, because it's never really, I'll say this, it's never really flashbacks and things you think about, like, oh man, I hate to throw you out there again, Eddie, like thinking of something that happened in Battle of Fallujah. It's usually little things that lead up to what brings those dark thoughts. You can have a bad relationship with your significant other. Maybe something's going on with your kid. Maybe you lose your job. It's just a layered effect. And it's as we know, New York City, or overall the tri-state area, Long Island, upstate, New York City, Jersey, it's expensive. But somebody, being the tip of there and helping that veteran, that they now have this compensation, which is it's deserved for the injuries that they received while they were in. It can help mitigate the fact that, like, there's food insecurity. Hey, I got to pay my rent and my mortgage. At least they have that extra income coming in, which is rightly deserved, that can help them out.
Ryan, you said something very interesting about 10 minutes ago regarding civilian life and the trauma, right? You were comparing someone that's in the military that has gone through that warfare, that mentality, in trying to recoup and whatnot. But I find it interesting because of childhood developments, right? I'm going to put my story out there. That's fine. Growing up, and Ryan, you know this, Dad was as strict as it gets. And it was a very raw childhood. This is how it is, and that's it. There's no. You got to do what you got to do. And I think sometimes as you're developing, you start second guessing yourself. You start trying to look for outlets. And I know with certain friends that I have that have gone through the same ramifications of that, there's bipolarism. And that's where I wanted to ask the panel as well. Like childhood developments and whatnot, sometimes it breeds addictions. And I know with me, it was sugar. I know some people might say, fuck, like sugar, what is that? That was my go-to. And I would see my mom go to that. Like whenever there was issues at home, food was that kind of vice. And that was for me. And I know many people, it's alcohol. Like, again, one of my family members, that's it right there. It's alcohol right there. And maybe we could draw some parallels here and to help one another, veterans, civilians, that there is that mental issue there. Maybe, there you go, let me bring Maddie up, that we're not talking about. The old schoolers, right? It's always about the old schoolers and that generation of not seeking help, of figuring stuff out on your own. And then we come into the equation and we're trying to seek for help, and we're being shunned as well because this is what worked for them. So I wanted to ask, again, just across the board with Liam, Johnny Boy, Eddie, Maddie, Tyson, and Ryan, the upbringing, is that a possible issue too that causes that mental break? That, all right, you know what? This is the only way that I can cope. And you fall into this vortex of, I know with me, sometimes it's depression, it's anxiety. Does that play with it too?
It does. I'm sorry. I'll say this. It's generational trauma. The cycle repeats itself. My dad grew up in a single parent home. Danny, you already knew. We were in the middle of high school when he passed, middle of senior year. And my wife actually joked. She was like, she brought it up recently. She's like, how's it feel to be an orphan? It's like, what are you freaking talking about? I never thought about it because my mom died many years earlier, but it took me years. And Eddie sort of mentioned this, where I was doing all this research. So my dad, now some of us, I know quite a few, I think maybe all of us, we're around the same age. So majority of the time, if you think about it, we go to school. We go to school with our parents are boomers, and we're either Gen X or millennials. My dad was a little bit older. I thought it was sort of funny thinking about it years later. My dad was like 50 years old trying to raise a 7-year-old kid. So he's like my grandfather. Meanwhile, the parents were like in their 20s.
Right.
And my dad, the silent generation, he just didn't pass. And it took me some research to kind of figure out how he was, because he never spoke about this stuff. He never spoke much about his time in the military. He never spoke about much of his time growing up in East New York, Brooklyn back in the 50s. And if you guys don't know, East New York back in the 50s was like ground zero for organized crime. So you're talking Henry Hill, John Gotti. So my dad, and I found out some stuff. My dad, he was one of those things where he got in trouble. I found some old newspaper clippings, and a newspaper clipping where he was standing next to the assistant district attorney for the Brooklyn DA and a cop behind him with like a table full of switchblades and like freaking zip guns. And my dad never spoke about that stuff. And then when I dug a little bit deeper, he grew up in a single parent home. It was his mom, and his mom was very abusive. She was an alcoholic. And then his father left when he was really young. He went out west to California, and just deeper and kind of figuring out the way he was. And my dad was a really good person, but he had his demons. And luckily, he never got physical but he was tough. But it's I'm going to go back to, I heard it before. Every villain has an origin story. Everybody has an origin story. Our parents have one, how they are. And the reason why they are is because they're grandparents. So, there's trauma everywhere. Like I said, I've said it earlier, there's trauma, not just for people that served in the military, and there's various means, MST, combat, whatever it is. It's also civilians. People deal with stuff, and we carry it forward. I struggle with certain things. I lived in a household in a one-bedroom apartment with my dad, and we lived off of food stamps. And Dan, I don't think you even knew this. I relied on those school lunches in high school. And my dad, he was it wasn't until years later, my dad was depressed because my mom was running the household, and when she just passed away out of nowhere, what was he going to do? He was the breadwinner. Then all of a sudden it was just, with him, it was a trickle down effect. It was a trickle down effect. His last 10 years after my mom died, he out, but he was very quiet. He wasn't open about it. And when he passed away of cancer, I'll tell you the truth. I think the last year of his life, maybe last 2 years, he just gave up. He was tired.
Now, Maddie, I wanted to ask you there.
Yeah.
With childhood development, your experiences, again, completely up to you how you want to answer. I know with my good friend Kyle, there was certain issues, his upbringing and whatnot, and then compounded with war and whatnot. It was like a perfect storm, unfortunately. How do you fight through that? How you're growing up, your mental state and whatnot, and then going into the military and trying to compound that and trying to figure everything out?
Well, a lot like Ryan said, I was raised in a British household where we don't talk about things. We don't express our feelings. We just swallow everything and keep calm and carry on. I remember when I was young, my mom was going through depression, and my grandfather just told her, he was a World War II vet, and he just told her, "Oh, you're just being moody," So I think in terms of what had happened and going through the military, you kind of just, lack of a better term, embrace the suck is what we were taught. Just embrace what you have going on and keep moving forward. I think as far as getting over it, or you don't really get over it. You just learn ways to deal with it, learn ways to adapt, learn what's going to happen, preemptively prepare yourself for each day. And know that there's a reason why you're moving forward. Have that anchor that keeps you moving forward and keeps you wanting to better yourself and better your community and everything like that.
Yeah, I think I've seen a lot of that with the friend I was speaking of too. I've known this kid since, not to put all of his business out there, but I've known this kid since about 6th grade. And I remember we all started playing football in middle school. And his father came down in the middle of practice one day, grabbed him by the face mask, dragged him. Didn't see the kid for like a year and a half. I didn't see him 8th grade. And then in the middle of 9th grade one day, I'm sitting in English class and he's just sitting next to me. And I was like, what are you doing here? He goes, yeah, I got sent to military school. And he was never good in school. And his mother was actually a bad alcoholic too, I remember. I think his father was like, okay, like very strict, but kind of tried to save him the best he could. But the mother was very bad with drinking. The kid barely graduated high school, very low grades. And that's actually, like looking back now, like with all the drinking, this is actually a second, DWI as well. And I would FaceTime him more like, we went down to boot camp. We went down to Paris Island in 2018 once he graduated out of there. And once he went out, I think he went to Indian Head in Maryland for a while. And I was FaceTiming him a lot. And there was always like a Truly in his hand or, a White Claw or whatever. And I was like, oh, you seem like you're kind of drinking a lot. And no, it's all right, And then like he'd kind of like move like the camera, you see like a bottle of like Jack Daniels, a bottle of Jameson that he's not really talking about. And I'm like, what's that about? Oh, it's not mine. It's not mine. Then, about a year or so after, he showed me his motorcycle. I got this beautiful motorcycle. He comes home. I'm like, how's the motorcycle? He's no more motorcycle. And I found out he was arrested. They confiscated the motorcycle. He went to rehab. Came out, oh yeah, I'm doing great. He was dating one of my friend's sisters for a while, and she moved out to California with him. And I was talking to my friend. That's how I found out all this. I was talking to him, and he's like, yeah, my sister's not dating him anymore. Actually got another DWI back in rehab, and I'm like, oh well, guess we're starting from square one again. So I think a lot of it does have to do with being just brought up in that environment, and it's like. You see your parents doing it from like a young age, like a lot of smokers, I believe, are like that too. You see your parents smoking, it's natural for you to smoke, So I think the structure is very important too,
Yep.
Military life doesn't help either.
Right.
It doesn't. I mean, there's a reason they say drink like a sailor. Every Liberty port, everything, and it's part of the culture, unfortunately. And I know that we had discussed this earlier, but I'm gonna expand a little bit as far as the drinking culture and all that. If you're getting DWIs and DUIs in the military, or you have a drinking problem, they'll kick you out. So
I don't know if I'm
That's
wording
a
it
lot of
correctly.
those.
I believe they said that he was like demoted, I guess, for like at like an entry level.
Oh yeah,
Whatever rank he had is gone. So, he
half
he
month's
has a lot
pay,
of work to do.
45. I
Yeah.
know that very well.
Can I ask a question in regards to that?
Go ahead.
So I always wanted to ask this, and if I'm being a little bit too much in regards to just stop me and just be like, you don't want to talk about it, right? But
Yeah.
I've known people again that are in the military and stuff like that, and have gotten arrested for something, right? And their commanding officer or their commander or whatever, right, would essentially come in to court with them, and they would have a lot of maybe their unit, I don't know, right there, and they see all of the uniform on there, and they won't charge them. Happens again, and it happens again, and same thing again occurs and all that. Is that something that you guys saw maybe as well? We don't got to put no names out there or nothing like that at all. But is that something of a norm? Because I mean, I know Ryan. I think Ryan said it earlier. I mean, it is a drinking culture, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's some way. Sometimes is the way to cope with things in regards to that. So I just wanted to
There's
ask
two
that.
Yeah, there's two sides of it. I mean, what you see in the civilian court isn't what happens in military life, right?
Mhm.
So they may have gotten off in court, but you still, when we had captain's mast, so an NJP, right? So you get non-judicial punishment. So you might get put on restriction for 45 days. You might get half month's pay for 2 months, or you might get sent to the brig, the military brig. um I don't know, I'm just using examples. You might get bread and water. You might, there's a bunch of different things, that punishments that the military will put on you, and then go to civilian court with you and go, look, we've done this with him, he is being punished. And that's a lot of the times why they, you know don't get any punishment on the civilian side.
So I gotta go on top of what Maddie is saying. So what's interesting is that, well, in the military, it's sort of a double-edged sword. You get some sort of NJP or whatever, non-judicial punishment for a DWI or whatever, and automatically you're going to be branded an alcoholic. But that of the edge, that if you seek help, you are branded. You can't, like I said, going back to what I said, you probably can't cross train into a field where it might require top secret clearance, upgraded from a secret. Yet on the civilian, so inside we have these things called VTCs, Veteran Treatment Courts. So here in Queens County, which is under the district attorney, Melinda Katz, they have specific judges trained on it. I think it's still got to be worked on. We've had this conversation, me and the commissioner for the New York City Department of Veteran Services, where there's got to be education on the issues. So say if there's a nonviolent offense, say something, they find out, they get picked up by the cops, they go to court, they'll guide them towards the Veteran Treatment Court. And from what I can't remember the name of the judge, but he's actually a veteran. I think he's a Vietnam vet or something. And what they kind of work through processes to fix, try to fix the issue, maybe through counseling. They'll be assigned maybe a peer mentor, which is also a veteran. And I know this too, because I sit on the Queens DA's Veterans Council. And there's that. And then guess what? As long as they go through the process and they show that they're getting better, then they will, whatever it is that they got picked up for, it could be a misdemeanor offense, it will be expunged as long as that they complete this program. But like I said, going back to the military, it's a double-edged sword. One side, yeah, you do this, hey, you got a DWI, you're going to get, you're going to get a non-judicial punishment, and that sticks on your record. On the other hand, you have an alcohol, like you haven't, maybe you realize maybe you got an alcohol issue and you don't get a DWI, you go seek help, you're branded and you're very limited with what you can do. And that this has been issues that's been happening for years, where leadership, the chain of command all over, doesn't matter what branch, where you're just plain and simple, you're branded. Another thing, another variable I do got to throw in there, veterans of color. I mean, I've heard it left and right, where if two people were in the military and they did the same exact thing, and one was, say, Hispanic, another one was white, and depending on there tends to be like old boy type of culture, then what's going to happen is, I've heard it time and time again, where the person who sort of doesn't fit in, guess what? They get they get some sort of non-judicial punishment, and the other person, part of the good old boy club, they get the slap on the wrist. Hey, just don't do it again. So
Same thing for male, female too.
Yeah, and thank you, Maddie, for bringing it up. I wasn't sure if I should bring it up. Yeah, like I said, veterans of color and women, They are a certain demographic and a very large demographic. Like I said, we're talking, Maddie, you can correct me. I think it's like 16-17% of the total DOD is women right now, maybe closing in
Something
on
like that? I believe so. Something like that. I'm not positive. I should know that, but I don't.
And then Eddie's perfect if he's comfortable ever saying anything. Listen, and we won't get a slap in the wrist because guess what? We're veterans, so we don't report to Uncle Sam anymore. So we're a little bit we're independent, but yeah, I mean, there's so many issues, and it's like I said before. U.S. Senator Gillibrand, she's really been a big fighter, and I know. Unfortunately, we try to get her to come on, and then I know Maddie knows. Maddie's part of our legislative team, so she knows a lot of this stuff. So Kirsten Gillibrand works really hard when it comes to the MST stuff, but there's always going to be pushback in the legislature, whether at the federal level in DC, and there's a lot of issues locally and at the state level and at the federal level.
Ryan, I appreciate you sharing that. Now, I'm going to start tying things up here, but I do have a couple of questions here. And Eddie, this one's for you as well. What were some of the most challenging and rewarding aspects of your service?
So probably the most challenging thing for me was when I got in trouble. I got what they called an NJP, an Article 15, and I got it for substance abuse, actually. So, and I actually got it when I was out in Fallujah, to be honest. Okay, so, but I didn't, so this something happened in December. They waited till we got home, and then pretty much I got drunk. We had stopped for the night, we found like a store with like bootleg Jack Daniels. It had the Jack Daniels bottle, the label, everything except the writing was Arabic. So I grabbed the case, threw it in the back of the truck, and then I'm like, oh. So after not having alcohol for several months, your tolerance does go down. So I'm sitting there like throwing back like mixing the drinks, just throwing it back. I'm like, oh shit, I'm drunk. In the middle of the night, they come in. They're like, all right, guys, we gotta go. I'm like, oh man, I can't. I'm drunk. So then, I was actually the CO's driver, the commanding officer's driver.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So I sat in the driver's seat. The commanding officer's looking at me like, let's go. What are you waiting for? I'm like, sir, I can't. He's like, why? I'm like, I'm drunk. He's like, what do you mean you're drunk? All right. So they pulled me out. They threw me in the back of a truck. They took away my rifle, which was like the worst thing ever in Fallujah, because, in the military, they teach you that your rifle is your life. So anyway, fast forward, the deployment went off without a hitch. And actually, at the end of that deployment, I was telling you I got the Most Improved Marine Award of that deployment, because after that, I was like, run how fast, shout how loud, jump how high. After that, because I knew that wasn't the kind of Marine I wanted to be. So day after we got back from our deployment, they're like, you got to go back. You got to get tomorrow 0900. You're going to go for office hours. You got to get in front of the man being the battalion commander. So you already know that means you're getting NJP'd. So, I got dressed up. I went up there. Sure enough, it was for substance abuse. They ran me up the flagpole. Okay, so, and that for me was like, I was like, all right, I'll take my hits. I did it. It was me. All right, it was the stupidest thing to do. I'll take the punishment. So, mind you, this was like the second day coming back home after the deployment. So I'm ready to go see my family. I had my girlfriend at the time, my wife now, was flying in from New York down to Houston. We're going to meet up. We had this whole thing planned out. And I ended up not being able to go because they said, they were like, they gave me a restriction. They pretty much threw the book at me. Which probably the next month I was going to get promoted. That wasn't happening no more. Instead, now I went down. I got demoted one more rank. And then So, but I was like, okay, whatever. And then they were like, so they told me you're going to be on restriction for this amount of time. I'm like, okay. But well, like, can I do this after I come back from block leave? They said, no, you have to do it now. So like, imagine like I was so depressed because I'm like, all my friends are going, everybody's going to see their family, and I'm still stuck on base. The only one in the barracks, the only one in the barracks. Everybody's gone home, and I'm still stuck there. I'm like, shit. I'm like, so it was pretty. That was pretty, and that's when I figured I was tested the most mentally because, like, in that moment, I'm like, you know what? I'm like, forget this. I'm just gonna go. I'm just gonna go. I'm gonna lay out. I'm gonna leave all my stuff here. Leave all my stuff here, and I'm just gonna go. Well, whatever happens, happens. But you know, and then I realized, like, you know what? If I do this, this is exactly what they want you to do. They want you to they want you to break. They want you to act out so they can say, "Oh, you see, we were right about you." And I'm like, that's not me. So, but that was like, let me tell you, every day, I'm calling home after being in Iraq. It's like after being in Fallujah, I'm like, man, I'm losing my mind. It's like, I'm like, man, I was going crazy by myself in this barracks room. You know, just crazy by myself in this barracks room. I can't go home. So, luckily my family came up to see me. They drove up from Houston. They came up to see me for a little bit, so but that for me was probably like the point where I might have just broken completely if it wasn't for discipline, if it wasn't for just not letting them, just not letting, not letting them be right about me, like in the Marine Corps. I'm sorry to say this, but they label you as a shitbag Marine. So, and that's what they had thought about me. And I'm like, that's not me. So I'm going to come back and I'm going to stay here. I'm going to do this and I'm going to stay out of trouble the rest of the time. But that was like the worst for me was not being able to see my family after a combat deployment, and I remember like just in my barracks room, just sweating, like I couldn't even sleep. I'm like, and that was probably the worst time for me. But luckily, it's like you fall back on your I guess I was an autopilot, where you just fall back on like your discipline, you fall back on like, and this is where it's important what you're taught as a kid, you're taught, your education, because you fall back on that when nothing else is there. That's kind of like what guides you through. And also because I knew I was better than that. But that for me was like not being out in Fallujah, not, in two-way rifle range out there with the insurgents. It was that coming home and not being able to see my family. That was probably for me like the worst time. The best time for me was coming back for my second deployment. So I left for my second deployment as an E2, right? As an E2, and then I come back as an E4. Everybody was totally blown in my unit, and that for me was like, aside from my like humanitarian service medal, that for me was like the best is seeing everybody's face, because they had already labeled me. I was like, oh, this has been Marine, this guy, this is what we expect. But then I'm coming back, and it took me to go to a different unit to get attached with the infantry, no less, and prove myself with them to gain 2 promotions within like 6 months. So, and then by the time I got back, everybody was like, oh my God, you left, and then you're coming back as an NCO, you're leaving as a junior Marine. So that for me was like the best thing that happened when I was in service, is just coming back and seeing everybody's face that, yeah, you thought I was out. You forgot I'm from New York,
It seems very rewarding.
Hey Eddie, are you Salvadorian?
I am.
As though I'm Ecuadorian. I grew up with a lot of Salvadorians out in Long Island. So when Ryan was talking about like with the Civil War stuff and everything like that, I remember all the stories that they used to tell me, how they would just walk down the street and there would be like heads just rolling down and stuff like that. Yeah, man, I remember the stories. But I was gonna say, it's like I miss some pupusas, bro.
Just had some the other day.
Yeah,
So-
I'm jealous.
That's actually the Civil War in El Salvador was the reason why my family came to the U.S. That's the reason why they came looking for a better life in those days. Women were getting raped, abused. Kids were getting pressed into service as child soldiers. So I was just a baby in those days, but my family is like, we gotta go. So now I only have like one aunt that lives down there. And her we don't really talk too much anyway. So we're American. But yeah, so that's the reason why we came up here, and then my grandma brought me over. I think I was a baby, and then when she crossed the border, so I came here illegally. So I hope there's nobody.
No, you're good, man. You're all right, dude.
around here
You're all right.
somewhere,
No ice here, man. You're good.
I'm naturalized now, but that's but yeah, so me and Ryan joke a lot about these kinds of things, but that's the reason why. And let me tell you, and that was another thing that when I got out, I'm like, yo, I need to find out more about my history, my family's history. So I would like ask my grandma, ask my mom, and to go into another question, answer another question about the childhood upbringing. I feel like, for me, since I've pretty much been raising kids for 75% of my life, because I was the oldest one, so I had to look out for my brothers, my sisters, and it's hard. It was frustrating because I want to go out, I want to have fun, I want to go do things, and then oh, you can't. You got to babysit. You got to look out for your kids. Look out for your my kids now. Look out for your brother and sister. So my mom would always be like, "You don't think I want to go out?" So when I would cry, my mom would be like, "I want to cry too, but I can't." She's like, "You got to be more like me." She's like, "You got to just go, go, go." And in a way, you compartmentalize that. And it's only later on when you start to realize, like, maybe in thinking that was the way to be, maybe it takes away from what you are now. And like with my kids, I take a totally different approach. Obviously, their life is a lot different than what mine was, but and for me, like, my go-to was food. It's food. It's food, not alcohol. It's not weed. It's not strip clubs. It's food. It's food. But I'm cutting back on that. A lot more water, drink water, and then for an outlet for me, it's like I play sports and I do photography. So those are my outlets.
Right.
But yeah, I feel now that I think about it, yeah. So my childhood upbringing does have a lot to do with the way I am now. Where, like I was telling you, I'm my mom was a single mother too. It was 4 of us, 5 of us in a 1-bedroom apartment over there in 168th Street, Jamaica, Queens. And so, and my mom was always, you got to be strong. You can't,
Hillcrest High.
Jamaica. So my mom was always like, you can't cry. You got to be stronger than this. You got to, and she's thinking it's a pep talk, but you're compartmentalizing these things, and then it's later on and you realize, like, damn, some of this stuff maybe might have done more harm than good, but she's thinking it's a pep talk, it's advice. But, and at least thankfully though, I could see it from a distance where I'm like, all right, I'll take the good parts of this.
Right.
I'll take the good parts here, and then I'll apply it to what I'm doing. And so that's what I'm doing now. And, it's, I'm just trying to, I don't know, maybe in trying to do it differently, I feel like you do lose some things because I'm not the type of parent my mom was. My mom was really strict, and I'm not. So,
Eddie, my bad, Dan.
No, we appreciate you sharing that, Eddie. We also want to welcome Gunny. Gunny, also a Marine. So, Eddie, Gunny.
Hey, how
Hoorah,
you doing,
no?
gentlemen? Appreciate
How's it
you guys
going,
for
Gunny?
having me. Rah.
Very cool.
What's up,
Gunny,
Eddie?
we have Maddie Ryan as well that served. Tyson, Johnny Boy, and Liam.
Eddie.
Nice
Gunny.
to see you all. Some familiar faces.
Semper
and some new ones as
Gumby.
well. Semper Gumby. You already know.
How you doing,
Ryan.
Gunny?
Pretty good. Pretty good. How you doing, Liam?
Good.
Johnny, you had a question?
Yeah, to Eddie, like when he's talking in regards to the stuff with his upbringing in regards to like it resonated a lot with me, man, because there was a lot of very similar things that you were talking in regards. So like I remember, being said that, like kind of feeling guilty, right? Because like my parents couldn't go out to go do something and all that stuff like that. Or I remember when I got married and then I had my first kid and my wife kind of like was like, how do you know how to like change a diaper or stuff like that? Well, I'm the oldest, right? And there's 5 of us. And, that stuff already came in. I was the babysitter. There wasn't, or so like when you said all them stuff, it just started like triggering all these memories when I was young. And I'm like to this day, because so my parents are Ecuadorian, right? So my grandparents came here with them and all that. And I had no idea, like in Ecuador, when you're young, like you have to be in the military. Like there's no ifs or buts about it. Like you're in the military as a kid, right? And that's how you come up and stuff like that. And like my dad, when he told me these things about it, now it makes so much more sense to me. Like my dad is 60 or about to be 60. He still wakes up at like 4 o'clock in the morning, right? He has his shoes a certain way, right? He folds stuff a certain way. And I used to always be like, dude, like it's Saturday. Like you could sleep past like 5:30, but he was always like, go, 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 go. I gotta go. And things like that. But there was never, a lot of them machismo stuff that would come along with being Hispanic and him and stuff like that. And it took him into his like 50s and all that to kind of really sit back and be like, hey man, some of the stuff that I did to you when you were young was wrong. Conversations with my mom be like, some of the things that I said was wrong. And it took such a long time for that. And I really wanted to touch something that Tyson said earlier about like the cyberbullying and like a lot of the social media stuff that's out there, right? It's crazy, man, because you could have a kid that's been like good their whole upbringing and all that stuff like that, but it's just one issue that comes along and it's a trickle effect that you get thousands and thousands and thousands of people. Like that's why even on this platform for myself, for what I do for work, like I don't want to put stuff out there and everything like that because I worry about somebody going back and saying this or that or anything. So I wanted to say that to Tyson a little bit earlier because that's another thing that I was like, yo, he's completely right. It's a different era, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So appreciate you guys for saying that.
Tyson, I did have a question for you. Because how we're going back and forth here. See, back in the day, again, same with Ryan. My parents were from the silent era. You don't talk about anything, nothing whatsoever. Like Gunny, just to bring you up to speed on what the topic of conversation is: childhood development, compounding with also going into the service, even civilian life, of how our development, what issues psychologically and whatnot. My question here, Tyson, if you could answer, is the dichotomy of it. Now you have an extremism of the silent era, and now what I hear now is, these kids are so soft. They're so soft now. They can't even take a joke. They're canceling everything. Where is that middle ground? Where is that? All right, you know what? Let's understand each other. There's certain things maybe we have to be a little bit more delicate on how to adjust and to get a resolution. Do you think that there'll ever be a certain point where we could just meet in the middle, that both sides of extremisms?
Well, the goal is communication, right? To be openly communicate everybody's issues so we hear both sides. That's the goal, right? Like that's what we're trying to do now. Like when I grew up, my father was rigid military, rigid army. Like work hard, do hard, be on time, be early, do it this way, and that's it. But when you mention having depression or anxiety, it's like, get over it, go back to work. Like it was just like, you're weak, you're full of shit, go back to work. Like that's just, you're having a bad day, you're in a bad mood. And it's like, no. So like you guys said, you kind of compartmentalize and you find ways to handle it on your own, because now you're like, all right, I tried to explain myself, I walked into a wall. Now what do I do? Because I'm not getting, like, how do you handle it? What do you do? And I went to alcohol. I'm like, well, I'm just going to drink. And that's it. So as but then now as the cool thing about our world right now is mental health is being talked about a lot more. Right. So it's more, it's like we're having this great forum. People are having more comfortable about the conversations. And now it's just about having respect. Okay, Dan, you have a certain way of looking at things. Let me hear your point of view with an open mind, not just like listen to you talk and not listen to you talk. You know what I'm saying? Like I hear you, but I'm not listening to you. We got to have an open mind. Like, all right, let me hear why you think I'm soft. I'll tell you why I'm not. Let's discuss it as adults and figure out what the middle ground is. And that's so hard to do because we live in such a judgmental world where everybody just likes to pile on and do this. And it's just, it's very, very difficult, man. It is. And like, Johnny boy, you said a great point. Like, if these kids these days want to be on social media because everybody's on it. They want to be on Instagram and TikTok and post things until they don't get 25 likes on their picture, until they don't get 1,000 views on their video, or and then they start feeling bad about themselves. And why can't I be them? Why can't I do this? Nobody likes me. I'm not, I'm not popular. Like it's all these things that happen to you, man, where it's difficult. It's a difficult time right now, man, to have these conversations and be starting with our kids. Like you're talking about the upbringing now is where it starts. Like cyberbullying now starts when you're, almost cursed again, starts when they're like 8, 9, 10 years old. Like everybody, it's when you're on video games, you're talking back and forth. Like everybody, the freedom of speech is great until everybody's piling on one kid that's 9 years old, can't defend themselves. And then they're stuck in the shadows and don't know how to handle it. Like the coping skills are tough. Communication skills are tough. And I think communication overall is going away because everybody's glued to their phones. Like how many times you go to a restaurant, you see a family of 4 and they're not talking. Everybody's down their phones scrolling through. Like I was at a party, a Super Bowl party, 10, 12 people there. Everybody's hanging out. You have a couple beers, this and that. Half of the place was not even watching the game. They're sitting there scrolling. There's nobody talking. Like that's half the problem. Like have conversations with one another. Talk about the things that we could all and understand what's going on with each other, with our families, our friends. And that's where you can make progress, I think.
Solid, Tyson. Solid. No, that's where I wanted to bring Gunny in.
If I could just add something real quick to that. I heard a real quote not too long ago that kind of stuck with me. Social media, it connects you with everybody else, but takes you further away from the people that you're with.
Yeah.
That really stuck with me.
It's true.
That's enormous, man. Now, Gunny, what, like going through your experiences and whatnot, through wartime and just being deployed and your upbringing, were there certain mental aspects where it's trying, like you're right into the crucible? How would you deal with that?
Yeah, no, I think a lot of it comes back to a lot of self-reflection, right? Understanding that not everybody that you want to have a conversation with you is going to be able to look at things the way you look at things. I grew up, raised initially by my grandmother, who was a very hard-nosed, no-nonsense grandma before I moved to the States. And then my mom, no-nonsense, hard-nosed mom. She was, she definitely was, I guess you can say assertive. Some would say a little bit too much so, but I learned very early on, kids, you're seen, not heard, right? I had to be quiet whenever I went to, I didn't get to express myself much as a kid. And then when you get older, you find yourself trying to figure out how to communicate, because as a kid, you weren't allowed to talk, when adults were present, you just had to sit there and be quiet. You couldn't really explore. I think the way it impacted me was I was able to go ahead and create a lot of bonds in terms of friends that I had met in church. So a lot of us, having been raised with very similar parents, we had like our own little core group where we found ways to communicate with each other. We kind of understood where each other was coming from. I think that's the hardest part, man. It's that the majority of individuals who go through hard ordeals in life tend to believe it's just them. Like they're the only ones right now out there dealing with it. They're on a cliff by themselves. They've got no one to turn to. And sometimes it's just taking the chance to just say something to someone and you'll be surprised. Like, wow, you're feeling the exact same way that I'm feeling. And that kind of a connection goes a long way. So I'll say that I was very fortunate and blessed to have found some early bonds in my life that allowed me to kind of understand how to communicate how I was feeling. I will say this current day and age, though, I have 4 kids. I have my oldest daughter. She's 14. I got a 14-year-old, a 13-year-old. My other daughter's 12. And then my son's my baby. He's 9. So my son's always playing video games and he's talking to other kids and they go back and forth with each other and whatnot. And we have conversations with him in regards to how to talk to people. I'm fortunate because my wife is very, very empathetic. Like, she understands. She also grew up the same generation as we all did. But somehow, some way for her, she's been able to go ahead and find ways to kind of empathize. She was also in the Marine Corps. She found ways to go ahead and communicate with not just her peers, but with her superiors. So, like, she's always had this skill set and this ability. It's actually a gift, if you ask me. For me, it took literally finding individuals who, again, I could go ahead and relate to have real conversations. And over time, I was able to develop into where I can talk to individuals now and kind of understand where they're coming from. Compliments to the wife for making me more of an empathetic individual and sympathetic as well. The hardest part about the whole thing is you got to get outside of your comfort zone. And there's people that are feeling the exact same way that you are. And if you're afraid and you believe that it's just you, you're gonna really start believing it. Like, even though it's not the reality, you will start believing that it is just you. So I guess the advice that I can have is, even at a young age, man, you got to find a circle. You have got to find a circle, and you'll be shocked when you decide to go ahead and come out of your shell a little bit, that there are a lot of people that are going through a lot of the same feelings and thought processes that you are. A lot of kids are being raised by Gen X or Gen whatever freaking parents and have the same kind of mentalities. So I think it starts there. And then as we get older, man, like, again, the whole soft thing. My grandfather was a big influencer in my life. My dad is a big influencer in my life. And the whole concept is, you don't cry about things. You're a man. You're supposed to have answers, have results. You don't have time to whine. And I've been like that my entire adult life. My wife hates it, but she's found ways to go ahead. When she knows that I'm like in my internal mode trying to go ahead and figure out something, she's figured out a way to go ahead and get me to communicate. That's a gift. That's a blessing and a gift, because not everybody has that. So I tell you right now, my wife has been a key component into why my mental health has been the way it is. And I think her being such a key component has allowed me as a father to not go ahead and treat my kids the way I was treated, right? Like, I let my kids be loud in the house. Sometimes does it drive me insane? It sure does. But they're expressing themselves, right? So when they're playing upstairs and they're being loud, or their friends are around, I try to allow them to express themselves and not go ahead and get angry and tell them kids shouldn't be heard. They should be seen only, like, because that's what I went through as a kid. And that is not the way. So again, the people in your life, the people in your circle, I think go a long way. And I think another reason why so many of us are kind of frustrated with this generation of individuals who, and a lot of us will probably have said it before, like, man, you're being kind of soft or whatever, is because of that whole Me Too movement, right? Everybody and their mom now wants to be a part of whatever's popular. And right now, as mental health is becoming something that's getting a lot of attention, and, you know, you got guys like Tyson pretty much out there putting his body on the line regularly to go out and bring attention to it. Like, it's becoming more mainstream. And as such, you got the Me Too individuals who want to be like, oh, well, you know, this happened to me. And a lot of times it's either exaggerated or made up. And I think those individuals tend to go ahead and be the loudest, because we're not going to be the loudest in regards to our mental health. But those that want to go ahead and be seen and talked to and pitied and whatnot, they're the loudest. They've kind of put a stigma on the whole concept of it, because those individuals are getting attacked. Those of us who do have those kind of issues are like, nobody cares. They're getting attacked when they mention it. And then we got to separate ourselves from the Me Too movement individuals who are trying to go ahead and get the pity and the love and the attention, vice the real ones who are going through it. And being able to identify as such is going to be a key component to making sure that the mental health movement continues to move forward in a positive way, where men and women don't feel like they have to shelter themselves from being able to communicate with individuals in their circle. But I'll agree with Tyson, man. It's an ongoing issue, and a lot of it stems very, very early on, trying to find a way as you become adults to find a way to cope and to go ahead and be able to talk to individuals and communicate clearly. Hey, you think I'm soft? Why do you think I'm soft? Like, it's an awkward conversation when you say it like that, but being, I guess you can say, man enough or woman enough to actually say, hey, why do you think that is, to be able to communicate will go a long way of pushing the stigma to the side and then opening more conversation, which I think is going to be key in, I guess, overcoming this mental health aspect.
It's amazing and how much things we all have in common, right? I keep hearing these stories, these upbringings, and that lead to, again, certain addictions and mental health issues, that we need to talk about this. We need to have these difficult conversations, Eddie, you brought up a great point when you were talking about your upbringing, where you would think that your family member is putting good out there, but it's causing harm. Same thing with me. Again, you don't talk about certain things, you man up, and you just keep grinding, keep doing what you're doing. But subliminally, everything subconsciously, it just keeps putting more unnecessary weight on, and you're trying to figure out the answers, but while you're figuring out certain answers, there's more questions and more questions. You could go out of your mind. And I know with my good friend, he reverted to the worst route. And that's what pains me the most, and seeing someone with so much potential, knowing that there was help out there. But when you feel that the answers aren't there, that no one understands you, you continue to close yourself and barricade yourself from so much helpful options. And that's what I wanted to talk to you, Maddie, about, of giving those individuals that platform where you're at. How do you approach that? How do you say, hey, look, my door is open, come in here. We're not going to label you. We're not going to put a stamp. Come here, open up. We can help.
I think as far as approaching it, I'm always very upfront and honest. I tell them I know there were times where we didn't want to put another foot in front of the other. If you have any issues, I'm here to talk to you about it. I did mention before how I always tell my story to help make it easier for others to tell their story.
Mhm.
And that seems to be a big or an easy way to go about it. Not easy, but it helps ease their pain. And they're like, okay, well, I'm not alone. As far as my case goes, I think it was one in 3 women in the military have MST. So it's more common than anyone really thinks about. So for me, telling my story, it shows them that you can survive and can go further and can thrive after. And it allows them a safe place to tell their story. And I can take some of their pain from them.
No, it's breathtaking to know that the help is there. And for individuals like you, Maddie, to extend that hand, it just goes a long way. Enormous. So we're going to wrap it up here. I want to thank all you guys, but I do want to say something in conclusion. Honoring veterans goes beyond simply saying thank you. It requires tangible actions like supporting their needs, advocating for their rights, and creating a society that values their service. Again, honoring veterans is not just a one-day event, but a continuous commitment to recognizing their sacrifices and ensuring their voices are heard, fostering an environment that truly values their service and contributions. Now, it's crucial to educate ourselves and others about the experiences of veterans, fostering empathy and understanding of the sacrifices that they have made. With that being said, Gunny, Eddie, Ryan, Maddie, Johnny Boy, everyone that came on tonight, Nate, it just speaks volumes of your testament of what you gave to this country. And we sincerely, all of us here, Liam, Tyson, Johnny Boy, people on the chat, we give you our gratitude and our thanks, because what you guys do, we can't even fathom it, man. We can't. Right. So we appreciate you.
Yeah, just everything that we take for granted every day, you guys are on the front lines fighting for it. So thank you is not enough, but it's all we can really say right now. Thank you.
Without a doubt. Guys, everybody have a great night. And again, we appreciate you.
Thank you
Have a
for
good
having
night,
us. Have a good night.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having
Thank
us.
you guys.
You
Have
got
a good night.
Have a good night.